You were watching that report there and simply shaking your head. I mean, it just seems to a lot of people that every time there's a crisis back home, the natural instinct of our Prime Minister is to clear off abroad.
Well, I find it quite galling that he's going to talk about defence and security when we don't have defence at home. You know, we have illegal migrants arriving every day. People don't feel safe on the streets. And he's doing absolutely zero to address that. You know, safety and sovereignty starts at home. And I think, you know, he just goes there because he's surrounded with globalists who really value global partnerships over national sovereignty. You know, and we have had leaders, Martin, who've given away our sovereignty in the name of global partnerships. And those global partnerships do not protect or do not benefit the people that they're elected to serve. And that's what you're seeing. He's so desperate to get back with the EU and Brexit.
I wonder sometimes if Keir Starmer's calling, if you like, is to be some kind of international diplomat. Perhaps he'd be a better foreign secretary than a prime minister. We've got to be careful, though. He might give away the Isle of Wight or something.
Well, he said he preferred Davos, didn't he, at some point?
Let's get back, if we could, to, meanwhile, while he's away, the left of the party are gathering. Angela Rayner putting the boot in. The Corbynista-led Transport Salaried Staffs Association backing Angela Rayner to get into number 10. Andy Burnham, incredibly, this afternoon announcing the compulsory purchase of privately rented property if the local authority decides it's not decent. This is a dramatic shift to the left.
I mean, it's redistribution of wealth. You know, the state no longer is saying that we will only regulate your property. They're saying if we're not happy with you, we're going to repossess it. If I was a landlord, that would frighten me to death, because who decides what's an acceptable situation or what isn't? And you know what, by the way, I'm a councillor in Westminster. I can tell you that the state of social housing for tenants in Westminster and in other councils in London is abysmal.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
So I'm wondering, are they going to repossess from their own councils? I mean, you've seen on social media, they've got mould, you know, things are repaired with duct tape when they should be. So I think they just need to look inward first and try and fix social housing, the crisis that we have here and the level that it is.
Can I ask you about another story we've been covering today, and that is Switzerland is planning to have a referendum. This is in their constitution. They can put it to the people about policy matters, not just at general election time, a referendum on capping the country's population size, and the majority of the population who are going to vote say it's a good idea. Should we do something similar here?
Well, I think, listen, when demographic change happens so rapidly, right, and without any democratic consent, which is effectively what's happened here, people feel that change is imposed on them as opposed to chosen. And that feeling of loss of control is very frustrating. And, you know, we are going through the same thing. And I think let's see how that pans out. But there has to be a cap on immigration. And people consistently vote for that. And governments consistently do the total opposite. At least this is a democratic process in motion. But listen, we had a big referendum on Brexit, and all we have is a government that's trying to frustrate a democratic vote.
100%. Now, Suella Braverman, one of your colleagues, the Reform Party, sat down with Chris Hope, our political editor, and she had this to say about potentially socialist-style policies. Let's take a look at that clip.
These are quite, I would say, socialist policies too. I mean, are you happy with that?
I am, actually. So I think there's actually a case for, if we are serious about reindustrialising our country and a renaissance of our industry, then I do think there is a need for
state
involvement. And our industries, our heavy industries, have been abandoned and unable to compete against, a more powerful and ascendant East. And so I do think there is a very strong case for that, which I support. The benefit will be more jobs. The benefit will be more growth for our economy. And I do think that, radical thinking needs to be, put in place. And I support that policy.
So Laila Cunningham, critics of Reform UK will say that's socialism, state control of industry, but surely it's sensible, particularly around things like steel, not to be reliant on China.
Well, exactly. Steel production, water supply to an extent, they're the backbone of industries. And if they fail, then our country fails, and we feel it immediately. And there has to be a serious discussion about when you lose domestic steel, you lose defence capability, and you'll be reliant on China. Steel is essential for defence, energy projects, that's everything. That's not commercial, that's national security. And right now, partly due to net zero, which I find is creating almost a national security energy because, we're so reliant on countries that are not aligned with us on critical supply chain. So I wouldn't call it socialist, by the way. For instance, Nigel did say, nationalising 50% of the water supply. The water supply is there's no point in having privatisation if it's the taxpayer that feels the burden of the losses and subsidises that company but gets none of the benefits.
Can I ask you about Sir Keir Starmer as a parting shot? How long do you think this can go on for? How long do you think he's got left?
Listen, I think when he had that meeting with MPs, I think if I was him, as ruthless and as unscrupulous as he is, I would say, you want to get rid of me, I'm going to call a snap election and you're all going to lose your job. And I think he can keep that hanging over their heads all the time. I don't know the mechanism with which you can force a change of leadership in the Labour Party. But, he does have that snap election hanging over their head. And if he does call it, they will lose terribly.
And is that the point? This is a government now which is backing him not through loyalty, but through self-preservation.
Yeah, he's a dead man walking. He doesn't have authority. But it just goes down to a fundamental point that it's all about personal ambition and not national ambition. Governments and leaders are very self-serving. It's obvious that such a dysfunctional Labour Party with him at the head is no longer serving the country. And he'll always be trying to avoid backstabbing. And he'll be so focused on that he's not focused on the country. And you know what I find frustrating, actually, I was discussing this, is the mainstream media, all they report are on these internal party politics. In Prime Minister's questions, we see both parties really arguing about themselves and their parties. But there is such a bigger scandal at play, and that is the lack of delivery and the overspending that our government's doing to this country. And the mainstream media really have to do a deep forensic dive into that. And that, for me, is the scandal. For me, the scandal is the highest taxation since World War II. People can't buy homes. The borders are porous. They can't stop illegal migration. But somehow the press and everyone is so focused on which civil servant got fired, it doesn't make any difference to people's lives.